creamy keyboard? Well, no problem. Just get out your wallet and there's tons of different options. They just cost hundreds of dollars. Sorry, what's that? You don't have hundreds of dollars? Well, then you've come to the right place. Because what if I told you that I found the creamiest budget keyboard and it only costs $60? Now I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, no way a budget keyboard could ever sound creamy, or maybe it's going to be really bad or something, or you're absolutely lying and you're really crazy and nothing is ever happy and my parents don't love me and... well, hold on. Calm down. I have it right here. Wow. Apparently in this box is the creamy keyboard, the Epamaker G884. And sent it over and here we are, ready to try the keyboard. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know what to expect. Now, the first thing I can expect is a pretty bare bones unboxing, because this thing is not glamorous whatsoever. It comes in a box. Guess what? It has accessories. But guess what? It's just a keycap puller, a cable, and 2 switches for some reason. Not sure what that's about. Also, for some reason, the keyboard is weirdly turned on already. I hope that's not a fire hazard or anything. Now, for the price, I'm expecting them to have cut a lot of different corners. But Epamaker is known for making a lot of different budget keyboards, but some of which cut a lot of different corners. And they also make a lot of different claims about this keyboard, saying that it's a creamy gasket keyboard, which you can take delight in the rich, creamy sound of. Whoa, don't take that out of context. Although you can take delight in the rich, creamy delight of my music, which is Cadelli. I'll have that link down below. Now, getting the keyboard unwrapped, it is unapologetically plastic. Like, the case is plastic. Guess what? The keycaps are also plastic, although that's pretty expected. But plastic is not necessarily a bad thing, as it can lead to some very nice, deep, creamy sounds, as long as they didn't cheap out on everything here. Now, they do also make some other claims about this board that might mean that it's better than just the sound. And tapping on this thing, it doesn't feel as hollow as some other budget keyboards. Like, it has quite a bit of substantial heft to it, making me think that maybe they've filled this with a lot of different stuff. Now, you also might notice the keycaps are also unapologetically gamery. Now, they say these are their custom shine-through RGB backlit keycaps with durable PBT, but to me, they seem pretty cheap. And with the RGB on, the RGB is incredibly bright, yet you're not really seeing it through the keycaps very well. So the G in G84 does stand for gaming as far as I'm aware, and this thing is trying to be more gaming oriented, but not Hall effect or anything like that. And for some reason, gamers really like playing games in the dark or something, so they need their shine-through keycaps. Personally, I'm a gamer that's put thousands of hours into games and never gamed in the dark. Leave a comment if you game in the dark, I'm a bit confused. Now, while also flipping this thing around, obviously because it's on and it's not plugged in, this thing is wireless and supports 3 different modes: Bluetooth, 2.4 gigahertz, and wired. Now, a lot of cheap keyboards are usually sacrificing one of these things. Maybe it's not wireless, maybe it's got really bad software. And this thing surprisingly has really good software. This thing uses VIA, but a very clunky implementation of it, where you have to go to their website, download a JSON file, and then upload it to VIA in order to use the software. However, once you do that, it's got really great software support. You can reprogram keys, you can adjust lighting, you can adjust macros. This is really great to see in a budget keyboard. You know what's kind of a bit perplexing? I've looked at a lot of other Epamaker keyboards, and this reminds me of the Epamaker TH85, a keyboard that I just looked at a few weeks ago with a similar badge, a similar layout, and it's $4 more with better looking keycaps? I'm a bit confused here. Now, I've got a full video on the Epamaker TH85 and a couple other different keyboards, so you can check that out if you want my full opinion on that board. But let's just figure out what makes this one different first. Now, aside from having side glow instead of the top glow, it does have the gamer keycaps, and by pulling them off, you can see that these switches are clear. Yeah, no, they actually didn't come up with any creative name for these. They're literally called the Epamaker Clear switches. They're a pre-lubed linear switch with a 45-gram bottom out force, meaning they're relatively lightweight to press. They don't have super long travel at 3.3 millimeters, and these are just a very smooth linear switch, and partially, I think, why this keyboard sounds so incredibly creamy. Because if you're trying to get a creamy keyboard, you need the switches to sound very good, the keyboard case to allow those deep sounds to resonate properly, and then the case to be filled with a certain amount of foams that accentuate everything and tie everything together into a lovely, creamy ball. But does that even mean anything? Well, this keyboard is actually really nice to type on. But not only are these switches incredibly good, The stabilizers are also very well lubed, which is very surprising on a cheap keyboard like this. The gasket mount is, there's really not much of a gasket mount here, is there? There's like no flex to this keyboard. So the gasket mount, in air quotes, is very lackluster. And if you're new to keyboards, gasket mounting is a way that we mount keyboard PCB and plates within the case so that you can potentially feel a little bit of bounce when you're typing. It eliminates a little bit of reverberations and makes the whole thing feel creamy as well, if it's done right. Otherwise, it's just a little bit of foam and your keyboard is as stiff as a rail like this. Now, some other interesting claims the Epomaker makes is that this is a fast and reliable gaming keyboard and that you can game like a pro. Granted, every single pro will be using Hall effect switches because even though they are a marginal difference in improvement, that is still a bit of improvement that every pro will need to milk. So this is not a pro gaming keyboard. However, it does have 2 milliseconds of latency on wired, which is pretty decent for a very cheap keyboard, and this will outperform your average really cheap membrane keyboard. But I don't really know why we need to market it as a gaming keyboard. Just call it a keyboard. Every keyboard is a gaming keyboard. However, it does have 1000 hertz polling, and it does have N key rollover, which basically every other keyboard has at this point. Okay, so we covered the basics, but we kind of need to know here, how did they even make it creamy? So like my therapist always says, and I always ignore, let's open up a bit. But first, like my therapist always says, it's time to you have the TH85, which to me is a more compelling keyboard for just a couple dollars more. Because both of these keyboards offer options for the creamy jade switches, which are similarly as creamy to these clear switches. So while the G84 is one of the creamiest budget keyboards you could possibly get,